Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Wendy Dillard here. Today is Friday. Happy Friday, March 23rd.
Happy.
2018, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Your second daily dose of happy for the day. And this has been a very happy week. It usually is a happy week around here because that's what we do with daily doses of happy. But this is a particularly happy week. And do you know why? It's because it's this week. This is the week. This is our week right here, right now. So that makes this the happiest week, don't you think?
That's right, because we're living in the now.
We live in the now.
Wherever we are, that should always be the bestest, baddest, happiest, right?
Absolutely. That's the way it works. So how you doing? You having a good day? Having a good week?
Oh, my gosh. Not only is it a good week, but, I recognize, because, we always start out with, hi, how are you? And I'm like, happy for no reason. But yet maybe there probably is one, but I feel exceptionally happy. Nothing specific is, occurring with Project X or Project B that should cause me to be over the moon. I just feel really good. I was training a new hire today, and it was really ironic because what we do on day one is we go through 6 or 7 different applications that our company uses. And I like to make sure that, he has access to everything and everything's working well for him. And then if it's not, I'll figure out how to get it fixed, because when you're new, you don't know who to go to. So That's my job.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be darned. I have been doing this for 10 years. I've onboarded at least 100 different people, and almost every new application we'd look at, there was a problem.
Really?
Yeah. And first of all, my win is it didn't faze me in the least.
Yeah, that's a big win.
And I was like, oh, well, okay. But then when it was all done, I said to him, almost a little apologetic, because, you want new people to have a good first impression, right?
Right.
And he says, or I said something to him like, this is really surprising to me that so many of your accesses are either not available or there's a problem with them. And he says, oh, that doesn't surprise me. Get this. Because I'm unlucky. I told you that, right?
Oh, dear.
And I said, well, honestly, if you told me, it slipped right past me because I don't recall that. And I just moved on. But that just stuck in my head, and it made me internally chuckle. So I thought, if this is not law of attraction going on, I don't know what is.
That's right.
And then I was sort of training my other person because I want to teach her how to do this onboarding process. Mm-hmm. And so I was talking to her just one-on-one afterwards, and I was talking about how, because I wanted her to know, normally there are not this many problems, because I don't want her to think, oh, my God, I'll never be able to do that. And she says, oh, well, don't you remember when you onboarded me? We had all sorts of issues going on with me. And I laughed because I forgot. She brings all sorts of negativity with her everywhere we go. So I thought I was outnumbered today. I had 2 people bringing their expectations for things don't go well or smoothly, and me, who love it, I expect everything to go smoothly all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought it was funny. It's 2-1, and had I known different, I could have, boosted up my energy, but it didn't matter because it was just a fun awareness. It was just fun to go, wow, look at how law of attraction is operating 24/7 by default, whether we're knowing about it or not.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm joyful because none of that really persuaded me to not feel great.
That's huge.
Yeah, and I will say this, that after you and I, had our show yesterday, the first thing I said to you when the show was done was how what our show was yesterday was so monumental for me personally, because I have one of the dearest friends in my life had called me a couple weeks ago, and we were just chatting, and I told him about me doing this show. And he was over the moon excited for me. I mean, we would talk about another subject, and he'd come back like, oh, my God, Wendy, I'm so excited for you. We'd move on to another subject. Oh, my God, 4 times. He said, I'm so excited for you to do something that you so love. And so at the end of our conversation, he said, is there a way for me to listen? Do you have a link or something you can send me? I said, oh, of course. Well, I get off the phone and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to send him a link. I don't want him to listen. And the reason had everything to do with religious beliefs, not because I have any weird reason that I wouldn't want somebody to listen to this show for the content, but I'm very aware that he's a Christian. And I know he's a Sunday school teacher. It's very important to him and his family. When he went through a health crisis last year, there was just a lot of Christian stuff around that. And the reason I say that is because even though he told me personally about the health thing, of course I wanted to be updated on how he was doing. And he said, my wife has this email list and she's been sending out like my health updates so I don't have to call 60 or 100 people on a regular basis. So I said, that's a great idea. And he goes, would you like to be added to the list? And I said, yeah, of course. So I'm added to the list, and I've met his wife, very, very lovely woman, but her emails are laden with Christianity. And not just Christian terms, because I can handle Christian terms easily because I was a Christian.
Yeah.
But it was also kind of a call to, if you don't know Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, please consider that. And he's this and he's that, and he can be this to you and he can be that to you, and it's about your eternal salvation. And I felt like I was at an altar call. And I could be exaggerating here. It felt as though that was on every email. It might not have been, but that was something that just set me back like, oh my gosh, I just want to know how my dear friend is doing. But there was so much of that. And I know that when I was a Christian, that was a natural part of what we were kind of compelled to do, even though that was not something I did.
Oh, okay.
So what I didn't realize until I was talking to my friend a few weeks ago, and I had this uncomfortable feeling about sending him a link to our show, is all of a sudden I was afraid that he won't like me anymore, or he would disconnect his friendship from me. And I thought, why on earth would I go down that road? Well, I realized because of how, quote, religious his wife's emails were and how I received them, it caused me to see him in a different light. Because even though I was well aware that he was a Christian and he told me specific things that he did and he was involved in, it was never an overt part of our conversations, nor was the fact that I'm not a Christian an overt part of our conversations. We were both well aware of what our belief systems were. But all of a sudden, these emails just really changed my perception of him. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's really, really so just dynamically involved in his Christianity. And and not that I didn't know that, but it was as though everything his wife said to me, it's though he was saying that to me.
Oh, wow.
And now that added a different dimension to my relationship with him, yet it really wasn't specifically with him. So I realized that, but I went, but still, it's such a big deal to me. And I just was so afraid of losing my friendship with him because he means so much. And I'd been asking my inner being, how do I move past this? How do I let this go so this becomes a non-issue and I can feel about him the way I've always felt about him? And, yesterday, totally unexpectedly, like I did not plan this. It's just how the conversation went. I shared very candidly why I was a Christian, how I became a Christian, what Christianity was starting to cause me to think, and it was very thought-provoking, and then how I left Christianity.
Right, yeah.
But I said it in such a way, and it felt so truthful to me, but not just truthful, but I didn't try to cover anything up. I wasn't thinking, oh my gosh, Christians are listening and they're going to be offended by me. It's like I felt like I was comfortable explaining my position and why I chose to make the decisions that I did in a way that felt like truth. And the best part, if it had no judgment attached to it. I wasn't judging my past. I wasn't judging the church that raised me. I wasn't judging my parents. There was no judgment. I have love for everybody involved because they helped to bring me to where I am now. And somehow, I mean, not that I can really tell you the exactness of it, I just know that somehow in the sharing what I did yesterday, it felt so real and truthful and right to me that as soon as you and I stopped talking, Walt, I immediately went to my inbox and I sent him the link.
Really?
Yeah. And it was like, oh yeah, whatever that weird thing was, it's gone. Because here's what happened from the time I hung up with you until the time I walked over to my desk. I thought to myself, why would this lovely man that I've enjoyed such a beautiful friendship with now for 5+ years, why would he all of a sudden disconnect from me just because he hears me saying what I think or feel on this show, even though he already knows this about me? And I went, oh my God, I have been so shallow ever since those emails from his wife. I became so shallow in my, not even shallow, I became so judgmental of who I thought he might be that he would disown me as a friend.
Mm.
And I'm like, that is doing him such a disservice, and it does me a disservice. And when I just like really tapped into who is he really, I went, he would never disconnect with me over something like this. This is so trivial. He loved me long time ago, even before he knew I was a Christian, and then after he knew I wasn't. It's like he's never treated me differently, but I treated me differently.
Yeah, I know that one.
Yeah, and so yesterday was just a real release of, I think, some stuff that probably had to do with a lot of judgment that I was holding, thinking people would judge me. But hear how I said that. It's not them judging me. It was me judging that they would judge me.
Right. In other words, it was in your head.
It had nothing to do with them. It was all about me.
That's right. Yeah.
So
that's a great, that's a great breakthrough you had there.
Yeah. One of those things that didn't expect it, but totally welcoming of it. It was just fabulous. I love that release. I didn't know that's what was coming, but like I said, that's what happened. That was the result. I sent off the link because before I was like wanting to cherry pick. Well, okay, I'm okay if he listens to this show, but not this one and not this one and not this one. Like I was predetermining what things he could judge and how. I know, it's so stupid. But now I see those were all my judgments. Those weren't his.
I've gone through the same thought process myself. I mean, because religion has come up a number of times over the years doing this podcast. And each time I at the end of it, I had to ask myself, how did I feel about what was said and so forth. And I was always in alignment with what was said, but I didn't want to be offending anybody. And I was thinking, well, could I have said something or could my co-host have said something that would be offensive? And then I finally would realize, well, it's since we weren't trying to offend anybody, then it really doesn't matter, because any offense taken is going to be on them, not on us. We weren't going out of our way to offend anybody. So I can just let it go. And that is a very freeing feeling, to just let it go and not worry about it. Just let it go. Things are going to work out well. And they do.
And they do. So now as I'm thinking about it, I feel wide open as I think about the weekend. Because when I'm on a weekend, I feel like I can process even more, which is kind of silly because I process so many wonderful things during the week, even though I'm working 11 and 12 hours a day at my day job. I still have lots of fun things that flow for me. But in particular, I'm having a brunch on Sunday with 3 of my dearest friends, and we are all law of attraction oriented. We are all wanting to evolve and grow, and our conversations are not only exciting, enlightening, and fun. It's such an exponential spin of our vibrational energies that we all make huge leaps into wherever we're wanting to go after our conversations, because they're usually like anywhere from 3 to 4 hours of just
yeah,
all sorts of magnificent stuff. So
that's
who knows
great.
what's going to come from that, but I
It's gonna be
totally
good
expect
stuff.
it'll be wonderful.
I'm sure it will be. Yeah. It's interesting too that we're talking about how stuff affects people, because just before we did today's podcast, Louise had I'm not sure exactly what it was, a documentary, I guess, on the TV of Carl Reiner, who is in his 90s, and he did this documentary, and the documentary is entitled, "If You Don't Read Your Obit, Eat Breakfast," which I thought was cute.
Don't be
Yeah,
okay.
because it means if you're not dead, then you're still alive, so go ahead and eat.
Oh, okay, got it. Because honestly, well, until you explained it, I didn't understand it.
Okay, well, it's old humor. What do you want? Anyway, no, seriously, the documentary is really fascinating, because basically what Carl did was he brought in all these friends of his who are, in almost all cases, I believe, in their 90s, and they're coming on camera and talking about having joy of life and living life to the fullest. And there were a lot of famous names. I mean, Dick Van Dyke was on there. I don't know if you've seen Dick lately, but I mean, he certainly looks like he's older, but I mean, the guy is just as agile as can be. He dances, he sings, he does all the stuff he used to do. It's just amazing.
Wow.
There was a 100-year-old woman who runs marathons. She was doing push-ups. She was doing calisthenics. I'm like, holy cow.
Wow.
I mean, there were all these people, and they were all coming on either showing what they do or talking, and every one of them had these super positive outlooks on life. And Norman Lear was one of the people on there, and he said, I'm paraphrasing here, he said, every day that I wake up, I never, ever think about any of the cons of being older. I think of only the pros, because all the pros add up to one thing. I'm still alive.
Good point.
Which is great. It's a wonderful point. And of course, if Carl was on there, that means Mel Brooks had to be on there. And of course, the two of them get going. You know how that is. Those two just will make anybody laugh. It was just, and it was just a lot of people in the entertainment industry who are non-engineerians and octogenarians and centenarians. I mean, they're just all doing really, really well in later years. Just very,
was Betty White on there?
Yeah, Betty White was in there. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's great. I haven't seen the whole thing. I'm hoping Louise is taping it so we can take a look at it again. But I thoroughly recommend it. A good show. If you've ever wondered about whether or not you have control through the power of your mind to decide what kind of life you're going to have in later years, watch this show. Because it will remove any doubts that you might have, any concerns that you might have. It will remove all of them.
That's really fascinating because, and I do not know the reason why. Well, yes, the moment I say I don't know the reason why, the reason pops in.
Doesn't that just get you? I mean, I'm telling you.
So ever since I was probably in my early 20s, I remember having the thought that I will be at my absolute best physically in my later years. That I am going to age in such a way that it's almost like, the movie Benjamin Button, which wasn't around when I was 20, but that I'm going to age backwards.
Oh,
that
right,
I'm going to blossom and just be so much more effervescent in my later years than I ever was in my earlier years. And so as just now I was saying, I don't know why this is. Yes, I do. Because I was so disappointed and frustrated and unhappy with the body that I had growing up and that I had in my 20s, 30s, 40s, etc. Every time I was being in a state of paying attention to how unhappy I was, that meant I was shooting off a rocket of desire for what I really desired, which was to be happy and to be agile and to love my body and to have flexibility and to just appreciate all the things that our magnificent body can actually do. That I felt when I was at that age, I maybe had some limitation. And now I pushed it as far as I could, but then, quote, the older I got, the more it was too much effort to do that pushing. And so what's interesting is where I am today, there is a a marketed note inside of me, like almost like bing, bing, bing. Okay, that thing that you said, when I'm older and in later years, that's when I will experience the best that there is for me to experience with my body. That alarm has gone off. I'm very aware that I'm entering the period that I had set forth so many years ago, that I would enter into this space where my body would just be an absolute marvel. And it's kind of cool because the other day I introduced Project B, which is Project Body.
Right.
And pretty much that's what I'm wanting to work on, and that's what I'm purposefully setting my intention towards and my desire. Now, it's not a new desire. It's one that I've had probably since I was less than 10 years old. So can you imagine how many times I've asked
for
the same type of thing?
Yeah.
And can you imagine how much energy I have amassed around the solution?
All I can
around
say is
the outcome already being in existence? It's got to be massive.
All I can say is that when you finally manage to get your resistance out of the way, watch out. It's going to be flying at you.
Watch out. But I do think it's really funny because you're talking about, Carl Reiner and all these others who are, up there in numbers, but they have these great quality of life. That was something that it's almost like I prophesied or foretold about who I would become way back in my 20s. And I knew that somewhere in my 50s, things were going to take off like nobody's business. And I feel like I'm at that point that I'm ready to allow that in. I really am ready to let go of that resistance. I'm no longer going, how come it doesn't happen? Why have I been without this for so many years? What's wrong with me? What do I need to do? What diet do I need to go on? What exercise regime? None of that. I mean, the other day I got my affirmation, happy body, happy life. And as I think on that just feels so good to me. And even this morning I was lying in bed and I was thinking, yeah, I probably need to get up, And I went, yeah, because I have a happy body, which gives me a happy life. And I went, okay, let's get up. Let's see all the fun, marvelous things that my body does for me. Not because I'm testing it, but because I enjoy my body. It's really quite fabulous.
I don't have the right theme music here, and I'm certainly going to be dating myself by doing this. But you have to imagine there's theme music in the background as I say, Wendy Dillard, this is your life!
I do remember that show. Yeah, that moment is it's happening. It's happening for me. It's unfolding. It's really quite incredible. As a matter of fact, as I was thinking about Project X yesterday and the fulfillment of that, I thought, why am I still talking about it in the future tense, even a little? Why not talk about it in the present tense? I thought, So I like to be transparent and I like to let people know what's really going on. But if I start saying it's here, Project X is here, is that going to confuse everybody? And would it matter if it confused everybody? And if everybody believed it had already happened, would they just be adding their energy to mine and it would then manifest actually quicker? I don't know. But
I would think so.
Kind of a thought that kind of rolled through my head.
I would think it would be true, yeah.
Because I do know that on a spiritual level, it's so done. It is so done. It's done. So I'm thinking, so what prohibits us as humans to want to stay so fixed on what is from a factual basis in three-dimensional reality versus spending more time focused on and talking about what's done in our vibrational reality?
I was going to come up with a snappy answer to that, but I'm not sure it's really appropriate. I think the answer... I think the answer is because we choose not to. And we don't have to make that choice. We can choose the other way around. I mean, which seems kind of obvious, but I think the obvious is actually, the short answer is the best one.
So Project X is already done. It's a vibrational reality. And as I focus on it, it feels so good. I feel so liberated. I feel so free. Having the culmination of something I've desired for so many years, knowing I've been able to let go of the resistance, it's like there's a party going on inside of me. It's just so fabulous. I can hear the woo, those little paper horn thingies, and I can see the party hats on my friends as I've invited them over, for a big celebration of Project X is here. It's finally here.
I have one question. I have one question. How long is the conga line?
Well, I'm feeling it, seeing it. I have a 5-car length driveway, and it's almost to the end of the driveway.
It is. Okay, well, that's a good one. That's a good long one. That qualifies.
Yeah. That felt pretty nice. So now, if you didn't know, if you hadn't tuned into other shows, would that feel like that was like happening right this moment, right now?
Well, if you haven't tuned into other shows, we want to know why. We want to know why you haven't subscribed, because that's what we keep telling people. Subscribe. Go right to the homepage, loatoday.net. The instructions are right there. You can't miss them. It's real easy to do. Do it now. Fortunately, most people do subscribe. We know that because of how many episodes the average person listens to based on the stats that we get. But if you haven't done it, what are you waiting for?
Really? Okay, well, I'm gonna take this to heart, because that felt really good to say that way. I'm gonna take this to heart to get a sense for how I can continue my Project X updates from inside my vibrational reality.
Good. Why not?
Wow.
Got nothing to lose and everything to gain.
Yummy.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of tear duct action going on. There's no tears actually pouring out of my face, but it's kind of like that lump in the throat, except it's happening with my tears. Like, that's so good. Like my body's been waiting for that.
So of the two emotions, good emotions and bad emotions, you got the good one.
That's really good. So you know what? I think that's probably a good cue for us to go into our reading for today, because I think that's what the topic is.
It's exactly what the topic is. Of course, it always is. The same topic is what we're talking about, but every emotion feels good or feels bad. That's the subsection of the book that we're in. We're in, of course, the Law of Attraction, the basics of the teachings of Abraham. We're up to part 3. We are no longer in part 2. I just had to throw that in. And we have a 2-paragraph section. Every emotion feels good or feels bad. You want it, or shall I read it?
Oh, I'll read the first paragraph. You read the second. How's that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
So every emotion that you feel is, without exception, communication from your inner being, letting you know in the moment the appropriateness of whatever you are thinking, speaking, or acting. In other words, as you think a thought that is not in vibrational harmony with your overall intent, your inner being will offer you negative emotion. As you do or say something that is not in vibrational harmony with who you really are and what you really want, your inner being will offer you negative emotion. And in like manner, when you are speaking, thinking, or acting in the direction of that which is in harmony with your intentions, your inner being will offer you positive emotion.
Exactly, because there are only 2 emotions. One of them feels good and the other feels bad. You call them all sorts of different things depending upon the situation that brought them forth, but as you recognize that this guidance system, which comes forth from within you in the form of emotion, speaks to you from your broader, all-inclusive perspective, you will be able to understand that you have the benefit of all the intentions that you hold here today and all the intentions that you emerged into this physical body with, and that you have the ability to factor in all the details of all your desires and beliefs in order to be able to make the absolute appropriate decisions at every point of time. And in parentheses that I'm writing in here, and by the way, that one thing that you keep thinking about over the last 40 years, that one's coming at you like a freight train.
Well, it is pretty fascinating to gain the awareness from this second paragraph that everything we've ever desired, whether in this lifetime or others, are all ready for the unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
That's big stuff. So we came into this physical body with intention with specific things we wanted to try out in this physical life, as well as all the other many things that we put into our vortex over our lifetime. That's all still there. And, you know, I have an awareness that, like, for example, my father, he lived at least the second half of his life in a very unhappy state. But I know that every time somebody experiences something that they do not like, they're shooting off another rocket of desire.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of thinking, you know, at the time that he transitioned, like, oh, poor dad, he never got what he really wanted. Oh, heck no. He put all that stuff in his vortex. It's not like this lifetime was a waste by any stretch of the imagination. It's like he put so much in there so that when he returns, he has so much more ready to unfold for him.
True.
I mean, there's nothing that's wasted. Nothing.
And I have to also add, I mean, it's well documented in the archives of this podcast, all the different times that I expressed my own difficulty with understanding and accepting, more the accepting than the understanding, of this basic concept that we brought from us information from other lifetimes. And I think probably the main reason I resisted that, and I guess to some small extent I still resist it a little bit today, is, well, if I brought all that with me, why don't I remember it? And that part always kind of throws me. But the simple fact is, like Abraham teaches, the more that we repeat a thought, the more it becomes a belief. A belief is just a thought we keep thinking over and over again. And you know what has happened as we keep reading all these things that keep saying over and over again that we have the stuff that we bring to this lifetime from previous lifetimes? What's happening is, I now believe it. Well, isn't that amazing?
Wow.
Isn't that
pretty
amazing?
Cool.
Yeah. And I love it because it really proves what Abraham says. A belief is a thought that we think over and over again. Sure enough, I keep thinking it over and over again, and almost against my will, because I was saying over and over again, I don't really believe it, but I kept thinking the thought, and now I believe it. That's bizarre.
Wow. And, you know, even I was thinking about this last night because of the things I shared during the show yesterday. I thought, so what is it that causes some Christians to be able to stay in Christianity and feel such joy and happiness and fulfillment and satisfaction? Because I know plenty of Christians who feel that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Me too.
And how is it I couldn't do it there, but yet I left Christianity and was able to find all of those wonderful, joyful things? And I don't believe it's because one thing is right and one thing is wrong. But what was coming to mind is this idea of how you create a belief. And the more question I had about things I was being taught, and the more it didn't make sense to me, and then the more I didn't get answers that I was seeking, I was feeling more uncomfortable and more uncomfortable. And it's like, I believe that I created such a thought, or a thought that I kept thinking over and over was creating such a belief that this doesn't work. This is not me. This is not for me. And I created all sorts of beliefs because I kept thinking them so much as I was asking questions and as I was feeling discontent because something wasn't making sense to me. I think I personally created something that was so big in my own now new belief system that this doesn't work for me. And there's too much hypocrisy, because that was really the area, because I'd hear one thing and something else, and they were too contradictory, which to me was hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And so what I know about within law of attraction, that sometimes when you've built up thoughts that are so big against something, it's actually easier to disembark and go to something new where the resistance doesn't exist. And you can start fresh. And I think that's sort of what happened for me, is I kind of started from a new blank slate. I didn't have a religion that I was now operating in. I didn't have any rules or regulations. I had nobody to teach me what was right or what was wrong. And I chose to be completely dependent upon, you know, my inner being, my inner God, to speak to me what was true for me. And that felt fresh and alive.
Yes.
You know, I've always been a person who I like to do things myself. That's just the nature of who I am. So it's not really any great surprise that I created a belief system out of nothing. I started from scratch and created my own belief system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I just kind of laughed and I went, huh. So I can imagine that my fellow Christians, those that I churched with, you know, in my earlier years, it was a safe, happy, successfully playful, and satisfying place to be within that belief structure, because they didn't set up all the roadblocks that I did.
Mm-hmm.
But the easiest, you know, talk about law of attraction, path of least resistance is how law of attraction operates. The path of least resistance for me was to walk away and start something new where there was no resistance, where everything felt possible, where everything felt inviting and welcoming to me. And it's like, wow, that's kind of cool.
Mm. Yeah, it is cool.
So of course, you know, law of attraction was just as much a part of my life then as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no this is bad and this is good. There is no this is wrong and this is right. It's just, how does it feel? Because that's what this section is all about. How does it feel? There's only two emotions. And actually, I'll even take the judgment, because good or bad are actually judgment words. I'll
Mm-hmm.
take that out.
Mm-hmm.
It's either something you desire or it's something you don't desire.
Exactly. Yeah. I call it prefer and not prefer, but it's the same thing.
Exactly. Is it your preference? Is it not your preference?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my preference is to feel good.
Yeah.
So I followed the path of least resistance that took me to that which felt good to me. And freedom is I think freedom is something we all desire. But for me, oh my gosh, it's so intense. When I don't have freedom, when I feel boxed in or imprisoned, oh my goodness. I have great intensity about how the hell I'm going to get out of it, because I'm heading toward freedom.
It's interesting, too, that you should mention this whole thing about choosing your own belief system. And the reason I say that is interesting to me is in my younger years, by which I mean my 20s, I was looking for a word to describe exactly what you just described, this concept of wanting to live the kind of life one prefers, where the emotions are the good ones because they're the ones that we prefer, and just mm-hmm. choosing and wanting and wishing to live just that way. I wanted a word for that, and I found one, but the word had already been created, and it had a negative connotation to it. And I tried so hard to put the word on, but I just couldn't do it because it had this negative connotation built on it. The word is libertine. A libertine literally is somebody who does whatever they want because it feels good. But the connotation that's been added on, that's been tacked onto it by society, is that a libertine is someone who engages in self-destructive behavior because they want to.
Now, where you're talking about that there's a preconceived notion, is that within a political realm?
No, well, libertine is actually, it doesn't fit any one particular political frame of reference, I don't think. I mean, it's a fairly generic word. I mean, it's a dictionary word, really.
Because it's not a word that I'm familiar with, which is why I was asking.
Well, I had to look pretty hard to find it. I was really looking. I was trying very hard. Now, the other thing about libertine is also somebody who is sexually active and has amoral concepts about sexuality. So that's part of it's like the Playboy word. The Playboy is a libertine. When I look it up online, it says a libertine is a person, especially a man, interesting, who behaves without moral principles or a sense of responsibility, especially in sexual matters. A person who rejects accepted opinions in matters of religion. A free thinker is characterized by a disregard of morality, especially in sexual matters, free thinking in matters of religion. But that's not what the origin of the word was. The origin of the word was somebody who just chooses to live with what feels good to them. It's like, wow, the things that we do to our words, it's just we beat them up. We kill them.
So you were a freedom seeker.
Yeah, very much so.
You were kind of like, in the 60s, you would have been called a hippie.
Probably, yeah, except that I didn't live in San Francisco. But other than that, yeah.
Well, but I mean, hippies were basically those who believed in free love, do what you want, like dump the status quo, don't live for the man. It was truly a time of do what feels good to you.
Yeah.
And, to hell with all the rules.
I didn't totally buy into what the hippies seemed to stand for, but they were very appealing to me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember being 8 years old thinking, I was born about 10 years too late because I would have preferred at that time, not now, but at that time, I preferred to have been about 18 because I could have been a hippie, because I really, really related to the ideology of Woodstock and the hippie movement. Now, I'm not talking about the drug parts of it because that's never been appealing to me, but I am talking about, doing things that the standards that had been set in our society, they felt too confining. So I love the idea of being a hippie. And I know my mom tells stories that when I was 2 years old and she would, put all the laundry in the big baby carriage and she'd put me on top of it, on top of all the laundry, and she'd walk us to the laundromat. I just wanted out and I'd say, no. And so she'd take me out. And even though this baby pram was really tall, this is, back in the 60s,
right?
It was really tall. She said I would reach above my head and put my hands on the handle and I'd push it, even though I could not see where I was going. And I would just repeat, self-do it, self-do it, self-do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, oh my goodness, talk about, I knew who I was at a very early age because nothing has changed in me concerning the idea of self-do it. I still want to do it myself. Whatever it is, I still want to do it myself.
Sure, yeah.
So,
and you mentioned,
doesn't surprise me. I built my own belief system myself.
Yeah, right. And you mentioned Woodstock. Woodstock is a very appropriate one to bring up for me because Woodstock occurred when I was 12 years old. So I wasn't quite old enough to go to a Woodstock, which is a shame because I grew up less than 2 hours away from where Woodstock took place. So talk about just missing it, I'm not sure I really would have wanted to go after I saw what they went through on the one hand, but on the other hand, there was a lot to it that was very attractive. It was a very loving kind of thing. It was a mess. It was a bit of a pigsty, but it was a very loving event. And that part of it is very intriguing to me.
Yeah, the intention behind it was liberation.
Yeah.
And I think that's where your word of what's the word you're using?
Libertine, yeah.
Libertine. I would imagine liberation is part of the root of that word.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's a big part of the word.
Huge desire for freedom and to be liberated from bondage.
Yep.
And I really relate to those kinds of words. I know that when I went from one situation in my life to another and people were asking me, so how does it feel with all this new stuff? And I said, like, finally I can take the orange jumpsuits off and burn them.
Yes.
Like, really? I said, yes, I feel like I have been liberated from prison. That was how extreme my circumstances felt to me, that I was going from one something to another. So I've always related to the concepts of, being imprisoned versus having the freedom to not be in prison.
Well, there's always a bond between people who are former prisoners. So as one former jailbird to another, hey, jailbird.
And the only difference is that I never was in an actual prison with cement walls around me. But what is fascinating is we can imprison ourselves through our mind, through our thoughts, what we choose to focus on. And, I'll bet many people who are listening can relate to certain things where they could say, yes, I have imprisoned myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so to which I would say, so when would now be a good time to open the door and walk out and be free?
And that's just it. That's actually one of the best descriptions that I can think of for why I started the podcast. I've tried to describe that a number of ways, but this is a good one. a really good one, that I wanted to start the podcast because it was a way of breaking free.
Mm.
And I didn't know how that was going to play out. I had no idea how that was going to play out. It was, I guess I actually listened to my inner voice and didn't know it. But that's really what it was. My inner voice said, this is the way to be free. And I said, okay, sign me up. I'm ready.
So how has the execution of doing this podcast, bad word, execution, never mind. How has moving forward and doing the podcast, how has that specifically given you the level of freedom that you were seeking?
Oh boy, I could do an entire book on that. If I have to bring it down into like a paragraph.
Well, we have 15 minutes, so take as much time as you want.
Okay, 3 paragraphs. So, no, I think I can break it down to a sentence. It has taught me how to feel joy. Because that's really what I wanted anyway. I wanted to feel joy. And I didn't know how to get there. It was too far to reach. The incremental approach, every time I tried that, I'd trip and fall, so it wasn't really working. I mean, ultimately I did end up using it, but at first it was just like, well, that doesn't work. Let's try something else. But the podcast gave me a way to feel like I am actually going to get there, get somewhere with it. I'm actually going to get there. I'm going to get to the point where I feel the joy. And interestingly enough, that's exactly what's happened. Now, is that me putting out an intention and the universe fulfilling it in the time that I was willing to accept it? Because it took time for the whole thing to come together. Was it like my resistance slowly reducing over time and stuff coming in? Yeah, I guess that's probably true. Law of attraction teaches us that. But from my perspective, it was just I was growing into joy one step at a time. And I was doing it by doing something that I enjoyed. I thought, well,
so
if you're going to do something,
one conversation at a time, one new thought at a time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which I guess was incremental when I think about it. I didn't plan it.
It is incremental.
I didn't plan it to be incremental. It was certainly incremental in really baby steps, but it was incremental. But for me, it was just I did something I enjoyed. And that, I think, was the biggest breakthrough for me, because all of my life, I have done work of various kinds that I didn't enjoy. I mean, I liked them to some degree. You know, certain things I enjoyed doing to some degree. But if you'd asked me, like, when I was working for the ad agency, or when I was working for the newspaper, or when I was working for the printing and pre-press company, or when I worked for the insurance agency, or when I went out on my own and started my own business as a web designer, or any of the things that I've done, did I love what I was doing? In every case, I would have had to say, honestly, no. I mean, I don't dislike it. I just don't really love it. It doesn't jazz me. It doesn't get me excited. The podcast was the first thing I ever found that jazzed me. And I desperately craved, how can I earn a living doing this? Because I love it. It's so much fun. And then I finally decided, well, I don't know how to make a living doing it. Not yet anyway, so I will just do it anyway. Because I had no other options. I'll just do it anyway.
And it's not your job to figure out the how.
Nope.
The cool thing is it's only your part of deliberate creation is to maintain your focus on what you desire. That's it.
And that I've been doing very well. That part I've been doing very well.
And if there's resistance on the trail, as you continue to focus on what you desire, those resistance pockets, if you will show up so that you can release them. Now, just saying it doesn't release it. You have to find what the truth is. Mm-hmm. Just like I started at the top of the show talking about my dear friend and how I had this belief that somehow he would judge me. Mm. I had to find a way to release that.
Yep.
And through just the energy shifting that was happening during our show yesterday, it caused me to ask some new questions, because it was shocking to me when I asked the question, do you really think of him as so shallow that he would just judge you and write you off because you said certain things about Christianity, even though he already knew that's what you thought? And I went, oh my gosh, no, of course not. But see, that was a resistance pocket. And through the show, it loosened things up. I asked a new question, and boom, I got a new answer.
Mm-hmm.
And no longer is that resistance even there. And so when we desire anything, if we stay focused on what we want, anything that's in the way of it's going to pop up.
Oh, yeah,
and so
it does.
So as you have had this desire, how do I make a living at doing this thing I love? Well, that's in your vortex. There is already a vibrational reality of it already being done. It's already done.
That's true. And I know part of it has been, you mentioned the resistances. The big resistance I know is that I had been continually asking the same question over and over again, which you very accurately pointed out is not up to me to figure out, which is, how am I going to make it happen? How am I going to make it possible for me to earn a living off of this? And yet I've been stuck to that for the longest time. I am slowly peeling it away. I wish I were peeling it away faster, but I've been able to peel it away slowly, so I will celebrate that part of it. But I have been peeling it away and just letting go of it. And I think the biggest shift I made in that direction was last November when I contacted you and Tom and Cindy and started to expand the show to a daily thing. Because at that point, that was my way of saying, yes, I want it to get to the point where I'm earning a living off of it. But in the meantime, I'm just going to have as much fun as I can. So that was a shift. That was a different energy from what I had had before. And that's the energy that I've been riding ever since then. Now, where's the next shift going to be? I don't know, but it's coming.
Well, one of the things I heard in what you were talking about is I wanted to come faster.
Oh, yeah.
And, that's such a common thing. We all want instant everything.
Absolutely.
And I would say there's, in the things that you've shared, it's like, I don't like the incremental thing. I didn't want to buy into incremental. And yet, guess what? Incrementally, I guess that's how I got to where I am.
That's it. Yep.
And, sometimes people want to know, how did I get to where I am, where I feel happy most of the time? And if my answer to them is incrementally, nobody wants to hear that.
I know.
I've never once heard any client say to me, oh, my God, so how long has it taken you? Well, sometimes 10 years, some things 3 years, some things 2 months. It just totally depends on how much resistance I had to the thing that I desired. But I will say one thing that is just an overarching truth. While you're waiting for the thing that you desire, if you surround yourself by positive thoughts, and I don't just mean mamby-pamby stuff, I mean like listen to LOA Today, listen to other gurus and leaders and people who speak positive messages, listen to TED Talks that cause you to feel inspired and uplifted. When you do that kind of thing on a regular basis, without total conscious awareness, you're actually buying into some of the philosophies and beliefs that other people are sharing. And when you start to hear them over and over, before you know it, you're believing it too.
Yeah, it's true.
And it starts to change your life. And you may not be aware of how it's changing your life, but it does. Because if you were to ask me specifically, well, really, Wendy, how did you get here? I'd say, really? I will say this, that how I know that I can change from being unhappy to happy, like really fast, like within 15 minutes or less, is because I have so many great specific thoughts. You could call them affirmations, you can call them mantras, you could call them beliefs, but they are thoughts that I have thought so many times that it is a hardcore truth for me. Like one of them is, everything is always working out for me. That is an unshakable truth for Wendy. I know that everything is always going to work out for me. It always does, it always has, and it always will be. That's unshakable in my world. Well, where did I get that idea? Well, I was listening to an Abraham CD. And my gosh, they said that so many times, it blew my mind. Until it literally was coming out of my mouth. And then I was sharing it with other people. And little by little, when I was in a difficult place, one of my, how am I going to get out of this? What can I focus on? all of a sudden that phrase would show up in my head. Everything always works out for me. Everything always works out for me. I've now said that, thought that, meditated on that for so long and so many times. It is now an integral part of who I am. But I'd never even heard of that phrase a couple of years ago. And now it's who I am. So was that incremental? Yeah. It was slow little influence of hearing that phrase being said and having it resonate within me like, I like that. That feels good to me. Until I adopted it and it became mine. And like I said, it's unshakable to me today. And that's just an example of one thought. I have probably hundreds that are very powerful, that I live in the energy of them. So that's how I'm able to buoy myself back up into happy within 15 minutes or less, because I have some really powerful thoughts that I've thought so many times they've become beliefs, and they're active beliefs for me. And so all I have to do is tap back into remembering them, and boom, I'm back into the energy of it, and boom, I buoy back up. Mm. And all of that happened, Walt, incrementally.
Yeah. Incrementalism is one of those things.
Outside of my conscious awareness.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's the nature of it, isn't it? When we do something incrementally, and I don't mean just like, 25 steps today, I mean like over a period of time, we forget what we were doing. We continue to do it, but we can forget the original intention. I want to learn to be X. I want to learn to feel whatever, and then we forget about it and we go on with life. But the incrementalism happens anyway, which is law of attraction's way of delivering it.
When we learned how to read, we didn't one day pick up a book and read it. We started with the alphabet. I mean, I'm just going to say most people started with the alphabet. We learned how to sound out words. We kind of learned how to write some of the letters. Then we started getting phonetics about, how you pronounce a word. And little by little, incrementally, we were taught. And by the time we were in second or third grade, it was like done. Mm-hmm. We figured it out. We could read. Granted, we may not have had a huge vocabulary yet, but, in third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grade, we started adding to our vocabulary, and by the time you hit high school, you can read all these textbooks. That was incremental.
It was.
And in a way it was conscious because we were in school, but it was unconscious because we can't physically see how our mind holds on to ideas or how it like links thoughts together, and boom, 1 week you don't know the alphabet and the next week you're singing the alphabet song. You just know you did it. Well, the truth is you did it incrementally. So I'm going to throw a big shout out for all of those who hate the thought of incremental or hate thinking, oh my God, I don't want to take small baby steps. You know what? That's the way it becomes sustainable. So even while you're waiting to have the big breakthrough of like things are just easy for you, be willing to go, okay, surround yourself with good stuff. And incrementally, you'll start letting that stuff seep in. And before you'll know it, you'll have a conscious awareness like, oh, okay, I know what this is. I know how to use this. I believe this. This is good. I believe some powerful stuff. Just kind of like Wendy's talking about, everything does always work out for me.
It does indeed. There's only one bad thing about incrementalism, and that is incrementally we've run out of time. So we're going to have to pick this up again next week. Because that's what incrementalism is.
But it's still working out for us, Walt, because Monday's going to show up, the phones still work, and we're going to get back on, and we're going to do this again.
Oh, thank goodness. Well, that means then I can order breakfast, so that's good.
That's right. If you're not transitioning, then have breakfast.
Have breakfast. There you go. So it's been a pleasure, and we'll pick it up again next week.
Yep, let's do it.
And we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye now.